Today, you are going to get a front row seat to the incredible Springbok career of 2007 Rugby World Cup champion BJ Botha. BJ, welcome to Front Row Rugby.
Cheers, Peter. Thanks very much for having me.
Now, before we get started, let's take a look at today's trivia question. In 2023, the Springboks hammered the All Blacks 35-7 before the Rugby World Cup. Where did the match take place? Now, if you know the answer to the question, you can put it in the comment section down below, and we'll also find out if BJ knows the answer, but we'll do that at the end of our conversation. BJ, let's begin in 2006. Talk to me about how you were feeling when you ran onto the field for the Springboks for the first time against the All Blacks at Loftus.
Well, I suppose the feeling before the game was excitement. I suppose, kind of reliving my dream, realizing my dream, I suppose, that I've been kind of, you kind of work towards these and you never kind of realize that come true. And I suppose being with the Sharks then, and I was playing for the Sharks then 6 years. And it was just, I suppose, incredible opportunity and moment for me and my family. And that I was selected and I came off the bench. I suppose even extra special against the All Blacks. So feeling before the game with excitement, and then obviously waiting for your chance to come onto the field. Feeling after the match not so good. We got quite a hiding that day. Roko Thoko ran circles around us, unfortunately, but we did that. We put that right the following weekend. But I suppose it's never perfect. But I suppose realizing a dream like that and coming true, you never really know what the moment might feel like, but you remember things like the anthem and kind of family watching you, and then just I suppose taking everything in that the moment presents.
As you mentioned, we lost quite badly, but then the following week we played the same opponents at Rustenburg. To date, the first and only rugby test match that has been played at the Royal Bafokeng Stadium. Now, some people describe that performance by the Springboks as a bloody-minded performance. We've sort of forced our way over the line to get the victory that day. How do you remember that occasion?
Yeah, there's no doubt. It was a bloody battle, I thought. There was a lot of blood spilt, as it is always when you play the All Blacks. Rustenburg being a strange place for sure. We actually spent some years growing up in Rustenburg, but we were really out in the bush as such. And staying in a game lodge, I think we did. So we prepared, in the bush, and we had a I think there was a field there that we used, but there was a lot on the cards there. I think the All Blacks were going for their record, 17 in a row or something. We knew that they wanted that, and I suppose one part was us just putting correct the weekend before. A lot of pride, obviously, playing against All Blacks anyway. And the Rustenburg test did present other kind of, I suppose, limitations around it. It wasn't going to be the big 40, 50, 60,000, seater stadium. The supporters coming, but they did come out in their droves, and we felt it. And I think we won that game with the last kick by Andre Pretorius. And as I said, it was a bloody battle. It was just tooth and nail every second, every minute of the game. I remember there was certain things being thrown around at rucks and scrums and mauls at every time, back in those days. So it was one of those,
As you mentioned, Andre Pretorius with that kick right at the end to win it for us. I've got to ask you, can you remember what you were actually thinking at that moment when he lined up that kick?
Yeah, as I said, I think it was a kind of a real battle, a real test match. And they always are against the All Blacks. And felt like we had done enough, but they just stayed in the game somehow. It wasn't one of those ones where we kind of got out of jail free. I think it was one of those ones that we really kind of worked hard to get, and was one of those kind of real hardworking, tests. And I suppose even sweeter that we did it the week after we obviously lost in Loftus and put that right, going forward with the test match that we know, follows on the following year, but the team actually, but it was one of those, I think those victories that, put us in a good place.
On the end of year tour, we faced Ireland, and we were wearing special commemorative jerseys to mark the 100th anniversary of the team being known as the Springboks. I know we lost that test match, but still, how much of a special occasion was that for you wearing those special jerseys?
Yeah, really special, I think. The old badge, the jersey, the color was different. The collar, I think, was white, and it was kind of that dark blue, and kind of the badge. It was like dark green. And jeepers, it was a special occasion for us. But I think maybe the occasion got the better of us, Not to take anything away from Ireland, to be honest. They were really good that day. They came out. I think it was one of the last tests we played at Lansdowne Road. Special place to play. A lot of special tests being played there. But I think the moment got away from us, and they really put on a show. I think it is, again, looking back at these tours that are end of year tours. I don't know if we tried a few different combinations that maybe didn't come off. But what I do realize is that that tour did put us in a better place after we finished with it. But as I said, from a memory perspective, playing a test like that, and I suppose representing the jersey, knowing, I suppose, the history of the Springboks and the passion behind it, and how passionate we are as a rugby nation, it was special to be part of that,
Hey, if you're enjoying this video, why not consider becoming a patron? It's my dream, guys, to do this full time, and with a small financial contribution, you can help me realize that dream. The link and the QR code is appearing on your screen right now, and I'll also put it down in the description area for you to go and click on at a later stage if you would like to do so. And by becoming a patron, I promise there will be great benefits for members. Now let's get back to the interview. The following week we lost again against England, and Jake White was summoned back to Cape Town to explain himself to the SA Rugby board. How distracting was that for the players?
Yeah, I think it wouldn't be that distracting. I think we kind of knew that test match we lost, to be honest, ourselves. I can't remember I can't recall what actually happened. Look, they won though, but I suppose it was really kind of our errors and where we went wrong, and so we were confident enough to put it right. So I suppose that week leading up to the result that we did in the second test, again, beating them at Twickenham, was one of those ones that we knew what we had to do is just emulate again and just, add on to that. So I don't think the guys were too stressed. I think Jake was always kind of obviously at the helm, but, all of us were really taking responsibility for ourselves and the team, and, each player led that at that level. So, and the assistant coaches staying behind would have been just as capable. It wouldn't have been too stressful. I think we were just kind of thinking, well, as these things happen, hopefully they just blow over and kind of, we move on with a result that fixes everything usually anyway, which it did. And we won the next test match, obviously, against England then.
And we played them again early in 2007 and put 50 points past them in both of the test matches. I know you only played in one of those, but how satisfying was that series victory?
Yeah, I know, it was definitely satisfying. I think there was a reason. There was always meaning to that. I think knowing we were going to play them later in the year in the World Cup, and that kind of confidence we would take from that, playing them in South Africa and hopefully putting up a score like that and a performance like that, obviously Bloemfontein, I think, and then Loftus, or it was Ellis Park, I can't remember. But, really satisfying, and especially coming off the interview tour, putting that right. And then, I suppose that bode us well for later on in the year in October. I think that was a big reason behind that. And I think it was smart by Jake and the management and the team, to plan that.
And the following week we played Samoa, just a one-off test match. I remember that one being particularly controversial because of the inclusion of Luke Watson. What do you remember about that?
Yeah, it was controversial. I suppose, the media loved that. I said the media made it controversial. I think it wasn't as controversial, not nearly as much inside. I think it was a controversial kind of battle in the media. I think Luke was, very well. I knew Luke playing with him at the Sharks. He was, I think that the media wanted just an in-look and seeing what was going on. But, we carried on like it was business as usual, He kind of got called up and, got included in the test. I think I started that test, and it was a tough old test that Samoa would always bring, physical battle. So we knew what we were up against, and, he got his test cap. But I think the media, maybe with all respect, maybe wanted to add some other dimension to the kind of one-off tests we were playing, that they wanted to bring this through and, cause some kind of uproar. But anyway, it worked out. It worked out well for us, I suppose, in one sense. Controversy was from a media side, not really from, in-house and the playing side, really, and I suppose I can't remember the scoreline. I think it was quite convincing at the end, but it was some tough work to kind of get through first and foremost.
How confident would you say the group was going to that 2007 Rugby World Cup?
Yeah, look, I think confidence is something, that I think it has many meanings in this aspect. I think we were kind of well prepared, and I suppose if you're well prepared, then you can be kind of quietly confident. I think from a preparation perspective, we had done everything we could. From a game perspective, from a pre-season, from a pre-World Cup perspective, went through the Tri-Nations, and these aspects of leaving players behind and taking players with, and then injury management. And, the bigger belief came from, I suppose, it's a belief perspective, believing, we believe that every single person of that squad was important. Never mind, could have been the water carrier, could have been anyone on the staff, could have been any one of the players. And the whole team and whole group had to believe, we couldn't have one person doubt. I think we had a strong belief in there, a real, ingrained belief that we would give ourselves, a great chance to come away, but it had to take game by game. It had to take game by game. And I suppose, don't know if you're going to touch on this, but I think stepping back from this area from a provincial perspective, I think one of the areas also that created this kind of belief was the Super Rugby final, which is not a great memory for myself in that perspective. From a Sharks perspective, my worst memory. But from a World Cup, it's a great memory because it brought us even closer together. All credit to the Bulls. We walk in the next day from a final that you lost, that you think you're never going to get over, which you don't really, and you kind of become closer because you've got this bigger trophy and this bigger cause. And I think that again galvanized us, ingrained in us this belief that we could be stronger. And look, top two teams in Super Rugby, both South African, all these things that are running off that. We're going to play. We know we're going to play in the pool games. We knew what we had to do. I suppose that belief more so than anything else was really, really strong, and that's what I think put us in a very good place.
We faced Samoa in our first match at the Rugby World Cup. We dealt with them quite decisively, 59-7, and that was followed by a 36-0 annihilation of England. Many people say that is the best performance ever by a Springbok team. I'd be interested to hear what your take is.
Yeah, I suppose it was definitely some of the most enjoyable. It felt kind of living in the Matrix almost in one part, playing in the Matrix. It felt like everything was going your way, especially from a defensive perspective. I think we were just kind of feeling, well, you have the ball, come at us. That's what it felt like. Really, it felt. And then when you are like that on defense, it's really is difficult then to kind of, I suppose, compete, because that's where teams try and break you down, and we were really kind of comfortable. That's the one area I do remember very, very much, that we were so, strong on defense. They just couldn't break our defense. So, yeah, really, really enjoyable. And I suppose to also get a 0, scoreline is also particularly enjoyable. And kind of the scoreline we put up. And then, it can be sometimes a slippery kind of banana as we kind of sometimes, it can sometimes be, because you're so convincing with the wind, kind of even the mental aspect you need to put right again. So we realized that. But yeah, we enjoyed the victory, and I think it put us in a good position again, not knowing we'd kind of meet England again. But if we did, that we'd have, I wouldn't say one up, because as they showed, it wasn't, but we'll talk about that later.
Indeed we shall. Now, if that performance against England was the best, or one of the best in the history of the Springboks, I think it's fair to say that the showing in the next match against Tonga was maybe not as good. What do you think you could put that down to?
Yeah, well, firstly, all credit to Tonga. They were just, what can you call it? I mean, we were kind of tackling, as we say, Coke machines all day, struggling to get our arms around their legs and their upper body, and just they were manhandling kind of most teams, and we had to deal with this physicality, and we had to put our bodies on the line. And I think from the Samoan game, it was a tough and physical battle, and then kind of obviously coming off the convincing England win, I think from a mental perspective we were in a good place. And Tonga brought their best, and they brought their best on that day, and narrowly kind of we won it in the last dying seconds. I'll never forget that pass in the corner there. It still kind of resonates in my mind, that was it. That's how close it was, really, not knowing what was to come in the weeks after. But no, Tonga just, they were a good outfit. They just had, I suppose, rugby within them, good rugby players, physical, hard, and look, we kind of just struggled to deal with that early on, and then we're chasing the game. And so, yeah, thankful to get through that one. It was one of those ones where you kind of just want to get through with the least amount of injuries. It's one of those ones, and especially being in a World Cup and where we wanted to go. It's one of those ones where you kind of just want to get the win and get out of there.
Funny that you should mention injuries, because in the very next match against the United States of America, I mean, we ran over them. It was not really a contest, so to speak, but you did pick up an injury in that match. Did you realize at that stage that your World Cup was over?
No, I don't really know what went to my mind, to be honest. You never think it's over. I suppose I'd done that knee before, and I had a similar injury before, and it was a lengthy injury when I did it before. Kind of weeks, and I mean 8 weeks, 10 weeks, so too long to kind of recover. So you always have hope, and even thinking in the days after that you'd kind of recover and stuff like that through some miracle. You kind of living in your little world there in the World Cup, really, that nothing actually doesn't exist, and you're kind of in this world of, you find a way somehow, but unfortunately, it was just not to be. And yeah, very disappointing, but was very grateful that I could contribute in the areas that I could leading up to the kind of playoffs. But I suppose, yeah, it's tough to put your finger on what you feel there. You're in an environment where you've contributed, you don't want to leave that environment because you want to be part of, knowing where the special team is going. You want to be part of that. And yeah, it's one of those ones you don't really let go of, I think you kind of really grateful to be part of the squad and lift the trophy and be there in the end, but it's still not sometimes but the road travel is not one that you unfortunately have control of, so it's one of those ones you have to accept.
BJ, I've had a couple of those Springboks from 2007 on the show, and quite a few of the 1995 Springboks as well. And it's interesting to me, one of the questions I ask all of them is, how did you feel at the moment that the referee blew the final whistle? And almost, I would say, like, we're talking about 95% of the time, the answer is relief, rather than joy or ecstasy or anything like that. But I'd be very keen to hear from you, given that you weren't actually part of the playing personnel that night. How did you feel at that moment?
No, that's 100% the right. I say that, that's exactly the way you feel. This kind of almost combustion of all the feelings, of all the training, of all the sacrifices, of all the time spent leading up to this moment. And it's a definite relief. It's like, just relax now, because you never want to let go of that feeling. Everything is next job, next thing. Well, after the game, on the pool games, what's the next opposition? How are we kind of analyzing them? How are you analyzing yourself? How you kind of sometimes on edge around people because of the next game, or nervousness or anxiousness about certain aspects. And, so that's relief of now, just it's over and it's gone the way you've planned and you're hoping to go. And no, that's definitely the case. You find that it's you find the joy later on when you start looking back and reflecting, and look, it's a joyous occasion. I was on the field and enjoying the time with the guys and lifting the trophy and everything. So, but there's no doubt it's a sense of relief of all the hours, of all the sacrifices, because yeah, as Jake said, and us, it's a 4-year plan. It's not a 1 year, it's a 4-year plan. It's guys not making the cut up to that. It's all the guys that have contributed along the way, in the final 30 odd that get to lift the trophy and get the medal, including the management, and for them. And, mostly sacrifice really, because yeah, it is. And it's you understand that sacrifice a little bit more so now being in that arena. But if you're not the gold medal winners, that how they kind of feel, from a player's perspective, third and second place, it's difficult. You kind of, I suppose that's what makes it special.
So what can you tell us about Jake White as a coach?
Yeah, Jake is, kind of, I suppose for me, and I'm still in touch with Jake. I think I did something about a year ago. Must be a year ago now, maybe just under a year, PR event, and we actually were at a game reserve doing something for booking.com together, and we were just reminiscing about kind of his time now at the Bulls and kind of the World Cup and leading up to that. And so, no, I have fond memories about Jake. You know, he backed me, and you know, when coaches back you, you'll go to the end for them. You know, so that's an important part. You know, coach backs you, and kind of so, you know, I've got you know, great relationship, you know, with Jake. And for me, Jake was, you know, great manager of players. You know, I think he really dealt with players well. Obviously, coming from his teaching background, you know, he understood them. You know, he understood how to kind of focus them and how to motivate them in one aspect. And, you know, that alignment, I think, that he created within the team, especially coming from, as I said, 2007 Super Rugby final, that alignment coming even from back in the day, from 2004, you know, when things were a little bit kind of leading up to 2005 and 6, when things could have, you know, fallen off the edge quite quickly, you know. But again, it's also his personality selected. You know, he selected personnel and around him, and he selected, you know, the players that could support him, and those were important selections, because those are players that, you know, stood up for him and stood together, and that's what I think is special, especially in South Africa. And as we say, you know, sometimes I think I've been asked here with the Afrikaans thing, "Hulle weet nie wat ons weet nie," and that's what I think it comes down to. They don't realize. One aspect is they don't realize the challenges we have just to get to a World Cup with the team you want to bring through, and all the influences from different areas. And I think that's what makes it special. And I suppose that's just one aspect of it, if you understand what I mean, and all these kind of bumps or potholes or whatever you want to call them that the coaches and players have, you know. So I think for me, yeah, I've got good memories of Jake. Jake never coached me outside of the Springbok, you know, arena. But yeah, I've only got good memories of him, and yeah.
And then injuries were unfortunately a part of your career again, 2008, 2009. How disappointing was it for you to miss out on the Tri-Nations and British and Irish Lions victories?
Yeah, look, I mean, for me, I suppose I more so wasn't really, I suppose in that time, I think what happened was I was overseas. I decided to come and play, obviously, at Ulster. In that stage, I wasn't really injured. I think the decision was made that year not to select Springboks that were abroad for that year. I'm not too sure who made the decision and stuff. So, but in line of that, I was, yeah, I suppose in one part, I've chosen my own path, and I decided to go overseas. Then it was the right timing. I felt an opportunity was there. You never know when it would come again. But looking back now, people ask me that, and I would say that's one area that I do regret not being part of. You know, it was an amazing series, and I think I look back now, it'd been great to be part of that. You know, you look back at how we have changed things, but hindsight's always a perfect science, you know. So the thing is, for me, is I think you just look at it as part of your journey, you know. And I wouldn't take back that I was overseas and what I have now, and you know how my journey of my professional career has gone. There's no ways I'll change that. But I think sometimes if you would, that's one area. If you could, that's one area I could say I would be part of that series. You know, it'd been a great series to be part of.
I should actually apologize to you, because I was actually thinking about the injury that you suffered in 2010, because that's when you came back, obviously, after having been overseas during that earlier period. And you were involved in the June Test matches, and it was still the Tri-Nations, not yet the Rugby Championship. And then, of course, the injury came. How frustrating was that for you?
Yeah, that injury was, you know, kind of for me, I think it was just around the time also going into the World Cup in 2011. And that was leading up to that. I remember getting a call and speaking to, I can't remember who now, and I was literally, then I went from Ulster to Munster and tore my calf in one of the pre-season games, kind of a real bad tear. And yeah, it was one of those ones again, timing-wise, and again, as this game teaches you, you know, it just kind of brings you down back to earth again very quickly. And I suppose one of those ones that you have to just look back at and say, listen, what if and could have and all this sort of stuff. But nothing else can help you out there other than just kind of looking forward really and looking up. And look, disappointing again. But as I said, injury is always part of the game. I always give this, you know, kind of one part. I always say the professional rugby, you know, career professional sporting career, you're only really tested is when you get injured. And that's when the real test starts. And that's when you really delve deep of how badly you really want to continue, because when the gym's empty and the kind of arena's empty and you're running on your own and you coming home on, as a how can I say, you go into training on your own and you're finding yourself outside of that squad, and your whole mission is to get back into that squad. So that drive needs to be strong. It needs to be an obsession.
I asked you earlier about Jake White as a coach. What can you tell us about Peter de Villiers?
Oh, Peter, obviously, as we all know, interesting, and I suppose one part, everyone, I suppose, how can I say, couldn't really say what he was going to say from one interview to the next, and they thought that was basically the way things were run in-house, but, they weren't. I think Peter was quite smart how he dealt with, certain aspects post-World Cup. And I think, he kind of gave those responsibilities to our senior players who took hold of those, and we still had most of our senior guys there. And, Peter did, in one part again, coach sat, backed me and he said, listen, this is where I kind of see you, and, it's yours to play for. Never guarantees the jersey. Springbok jersey is never guaranteed, but he says, listen, if you want it enough, that he backed you to kind of, to get there and retain it. So, but Peter, I actually, not the first time I crossed paths with Peter. Peter de Villiers was my under-21 coach back in 2001. So it wasn't the first time. And look, I had run-ins with Peter and there. But look, I suppose everyone's got their views on Peter, and he's always kind of, I suppose, in the spotlight. But for me, he was kind of passionate about rugby, loved the game. Lived his dream, I suppose, in one part that he wanted to coach the Springboks. And I suppose, he lived in that arena where, again, it can be quite cutthroat at most times. So, and I think he kind of lived through that. And look, as players, I think if you ask any of the players, they enjoyed him. It was one of those ones where it's completely different to Jake, completely different to kind of all the other coaches. And you still really at international level have a large contingent, as I said, of senior players that do run the show, really, and they take control, and it's the coach's job to really guide them and, I suppose, in one sense, not let it get out of hand.
So you touched on it a little bit earlier on about the SA Rugby policy of not selecting overseas-based players, and then there was a period where sometimes they were, sometimes they weren't, and they would make exceptions for certain players. So with that in mind, I'd like to ask you, BJ, did Heineke Meyer ever give you a call about coming back?
No, not that I can recall of. No, he didn't. No, not that I can recall. I can't remember now, but I don't think so. But yeah, I suppose it was always kind of one. It was strange post. I think it was post 2011 World Cup. Maybe I'm not too sure if that was the time. But it was a strange time. Some guys were allowed, and then they started talking about certain number of tests. Over 50 tests, then you'll be allowed, because that means you kind of, I suppose, you played for you're settled Springbok and all sort of stuff, and you can't be giving away new test caps to someone overseas. But I'm happy the way that things have run now anyway. Sorry if I'm jumping your question, the next question, but I'm happy, to be honest, to see that it's happening. It's what's happening now is the gates are open, and anyone that is, eligible to play for South Africa should be given the opportunity, whether they choose to play there, rugby in Japan or wherever. It's a world, it's a universal game worldwide, and players shouldn't be punished to make decisions, personal decisions for him and his family, or a financial decision not to play for his country. I think the best player should play. Doesn't matter where to be playing,
Absolutely. Personally, I've always said it's a professional sport, and that's exactly the way that it should be done. Let me ask you, BJ, who was your toughest opponent?
Yeah, cheapest. I must be honest with you. I went through, this is a kind of, I suppose, how you go through your career when you think it's difficult, because I think early on, things are always difficult. I played early on against the strong Highlanders, the renowned pack of Carl Hooft and, kind of Anton Oliver, and then Cole Hammond was still young then, went against them, and then you kind of, learn your trade to an extent, and you come out and you think you're going well, and then suddenly you get a younger French prop coming up against you, and he catches you in a tight space, and you think, oh, well, I haven't learned that yet. But look, I think the kind of the toughest, one of the toughest hookers I've ever scrummed against, because with scrummaging, my belief and my experience anyway, a lot changes with the hooker. I've scrummed against, many kind of, I suppose, loose heads, and they suddenly change the hooker, and suddenly this guy becomes an animal, or he's been really tough, and then they take off the hooker, and then suddenly it becomes easier. But look, I've always stated, I think Orsa's always been a great, kind of opponent for me. I looked up to him as a kind of a one-part hero, 95 World Cup, and then suddenly playing against him, and kind of then Narko Drotsky is playing with him in the front row, and then it's a tough position to go into, So these guys, so if I say the toughest combination would have probably been like combinations of kind of maybe Narko Drotsky and Ors, and then you go into stuff like Anton Oliver and Carl Hooft back in the day. That sort of combination was tough to scrum against. You had to find a real dark place to get out of. A couple of the French guys, Marcanet, and then I suppose, you always, kind of, I suppose my measuring stick really was kind of really, you need to be consistent, So anyone that you need a consistent, you can't have one bad scrum, because I suppose one bad scrum might be the scrum that basically doesn't count for that one play, and then that's the winning of the game. So I always believed you need to be consistent throughout. So if there was one poor scrum or one bad effort, unfortunately, responsibility is always going to fall on the tight head, and he is the guy that is, so-called, I suppose, cornerstone. And when the chips do fall, you are the one that does, take all the responsibility, and then you are then also exposed. As we know with tight heads, they can be very much be standing on the eighth man's head very quickly, and that will show quite clearly what's happened, in a scrum. So for me, those two combinations, I would say, were some of the toughest. There are others definitely in provincial and stuff, but they just don't stick out probably as much as they do.
When you look around today, is there a player that you admire particularly?
Yeah, look, I mean, players today, there are some kind of incredible players, and the game's evolved. Game's evolved a lot. I think just with everything from the rules changing to how we used to kind of just do scrum back in the day. I think we spoke about the other day, four different scrum changes since I started, or five maybe. That's just the one area, and then breakdown and attack, and now suddenly a big talking point is the tackle. But for me, I suppose look back at players that are, as I said, we talk about consistently, consistent, because I think the measuring stick really, again, as you always know, when players make it to the top, it's the easier part is to get there, the more difficult part is to stay there. And I suppose when I look at players, you have to look at guys, and I'm not just saying that I'm kind of, because I'm South African, but you have to look at the South African team, you have to look at the guys that are there and putting up their hands year in, year out, guys like Evan, I mean, I have respect for massive respect for Frans Malherbe. With all honesty, a couple of years back, I had doubts, I had doubts about, where the scrum and that sort of stuff, and, the cornerstone around that, but he's answered that 1,000 times. And the way he has been, the cornerstone of that scrum, is just everything built around that. And people don't realize how important his position is, what he's done there, how big his contribution is there. So he's a guy that, kind of, as I said, it is consistent, nothing really. And then I suppose the rise of Sia, we all talk about that, and how he's kind of not only galvanized, I suppose a team, but also a nation, his story. And, there are many other stories like that, I think, to be told. Unfortunately, we haven't seen them, and hopefully we do. I think there are a lot of those stories that are out there, and hopefully we get to see them, and hopefully they get the opportunities that these passionate rugby, boys get, that are playing the game. these players get. So they are boys and girls, and they kind of find a way to the top. I think those are the guys that probably stick out for now. As I said, I think I've played with a lot of guys that are still very much in the rugby realm now, like John and Butch and these guys that come to mind, Percy and all the kind of guys that we played with. And I suppose they guys that will always be, guys we kind of have formed great relationships with and, been really part of something special. But I think most recently are probably the guys I mentioned there, are kind of special players, especially because they kind of they keep getting better somehow, and they keep kind of being consistent.
Is there a particularly funny moment that you can share with us from your time with the Springboks?
Yeah, there's many of them that I can that I won't share. But I will share one thing that's probably rugby related. I was coming back from a neck injury in 2006, and I literally had a neck kind of discectomy, which was basically like a fusion, but they basically did a different surgery for me to come back faster. And I had the wound was actually on the back of my neck, not on the front, and it got infected. And so the thing was actually holding me back was actually infection, because it was quite a big scar being on the back of your neck and stuff. Any case, the way I played against Australia, I'll never forget it, Ellis Cup. And so I had this massive plaster on the back of my neck, like a big plaster. It was almost the size of an A4 page. And anyway, I'm happy to have this on my back. It's protecting me from infection, further infection, whatever the case may be. Anyway, the first scrum goes down, and this whole, as they hit my neck like that, this whole plaster falls in the middle of the scrum. And so the whole thing is ripped off. It falls in the middle of the scrum. Now it looks like almost a ball because it's white, and everyone doesn't know what to do at that moment. And the scrum stops, and they actually reset it and stuff. And like, no, sorry, that is mine. Okay, pick it up and chuck it out. But that's kind of comical and kind of look. But there's many times I think you find yourself in a tight spot under a maul or a ruck back in the day when you could hold someone back or pull someone into your have a tight grip on someone, or and there's kind of times that are special that you share together. But there are many of them, and I suppose that's what makes the game of rugby so special. I think you kind of share these memories in the journey, and you kind of continually look back on them, and you kind of continue chat about what happened there, look what happened there. And then I suppose when I was playing for Munster, another thing I wouldn't have found comical, because I was the one that was obviously running around looking for my shirt, but I lost my jersey in a mall, and I couldn't get it off my arm. I actually completely got pulled off over my head, because one player playing against Leinster, I couldn't so I couldn't see. So basically the fastest way was to pull it off my head, but I still had it on my arm, thinking, well, I was going to put it back on again, but it just phase after phase after phase after phase, and I couldn't tackle it. So I just chucked it. And obviously the phase ended quite positively, that we finished off stopping them from crossing the line. And, and then I'm walking around without a shirt on. There I'm running in defense without a shirt. So anyway, but you look back at these, and again, funny moments really. And it was, as I said, it was all part of the game,
Very cool stories. BJ, what are you up to these days?
So at the moment I'm in Ireland, kind of in director of rugby at a school, small private school. We're only 220 boys at a school called Glenstall Abbey, and running the rugby program there. And then I'm also head coach of the club here in Limerick as well, UL Bohemians, and we play in the All Ireland League. So all in rugby, and then kind of my private work is still kind of consulting from a scrum perspective. Very passionate about the scrum still. I do help individuals, and at times some teams, majority of the times to kind of help coaches. Passionate about upskilling coaches really from a scrum perspective, and not really about the actual how can I say, the passion comes from, yes, that I played there, but more so over the last years I found that with the rule changes and World Rugby's view on the scrum and stuff, I've felt that it's been needed, that it's special. Scrum is special, not because I played there. It's a special part of rugby union, and I think it needs to be protected. And I think we've lost the rag a little bit there. Looking at too many components to add at one time too fast, and then we have this whole load on the ref, and then everyone steps back and say, well, no, it's a ref's fault, which it isn't. It's the education. It's the education side. It's simple as that. It's too many at one time. And I've said that from the beginning, that's not how scrum works. It's 8 against 8, and it's like the ruck. It's very, very, you need to build it and look back. But that's one part that I'm really passionate about. And anyway, so that's what I'm busy with. Yeah. And I still try and dissect the scrum from time to time. I did a little bit of the World Cup and did do a little bit of the USC, but when I have time again, and then you kind of have 1,000 replies and some maybe not so positive, and then you kind of move on again. But yeah, you'd always find that it's the one area that I've always enjoyed, and I suppose that I'm passionate about. So don't think you'll ever lose that.
All right, BJ, we're going to finish off by looking at that trivia question again quickly. In 2023, the Springboks hammered the All Blacks 35-7 before the Rugby World Cup. Where did the match take place? Do you know the answer, BJ?
Twickenham.
Twickenham is the correct answer.
Exactly. 100%.
BJ, let me say it was lovely having you on Front Row Rugby today. An absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. And I really hope we can have you on again in the future.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks for having me. Cheers.
Last time on Front Row Rugby, Kaya Malotana was my guest. You can go and watch that video. It's appearing on your screen right now. Next time, Marius Hubert will be here.